Welcome to another episode of the Say Goodbye and Imagine podcast. I am looking forward to today's discussion. It's a new one for us. We're going to talk about how to stay the course after we put a substance to the side because we're not done after the first 30 days or the first 90 days. There's things that come up and we want to be aware of them. We want to be aware of them whether we're a family member dealing with a loved one, or we want to certainly be aware of them if we're the ones that are dealing with the temptation of going back to that substance. But I have with me today Dr. Brian Licuanan. I said that right, right?
You said it right on
And
point.
so, again, in part one, we talked about understanding from both perspectives the challenges and trying to get someone to get help, whether that's the challenge. Well, we talked about stigma as being a challenge. We talked
Hmm.
about hope as being a
Hmm.
key motivator for
Hmm.
somebody moving forward. We talked about willpower. We talked about neuroplasticity. So if you missed that episode, go back and listen because it was a great one. Here we're going to switch the focus to things that either protect us in healing or our risk factors in healing, and those are just super important things to share. So let me tell you about Dr. Brian. He is an author, speaker, family crisis strategist, and board certified psychologist practicing out of Southern California with nearly 20 years of clinical experience treating highly acute clients struggling with mental health and substance use disorders. He also facilitates support groups for families needing to get loved ones into treatment and provides family crisis interventions for families desperate for help. He's passionate about spreading mental health awareness and has appeared on The Doctor Show, Dr. Drew Midday Live, Spectrum News, Fox News, KTLA News, Women's Health, and MSN. And I just love your passion, Dr. Brian, in all of this. Before we get started and welcome, if you are enjoying this podcast, please like it, tell your friends about it, subscribe, follow us, because that's how we can spread the word and help more people. So, with that, welcome, Dr. Brian.
Thank you. Thank you for welcoming me back. Yes, it was absolutely, Rose, a great first segment, and I'm really appreciate you continuing and wanting to continue on with this conversation. So thank you.
Right, and a lot of our conversation is based in your book, which is titled "How to Get Your Resisting Loved One into Treatment." And I did this last time. I'll do it again. Treatment just means getting help, right? We don't need to, even though you're dealing with acute
Mhm.
situations. Every concept you discuss in there is applicable to no matter where you are on the spectrum of a substance use disorder. Would I be incorrect in stating that fact?
Yes,
Yeah.
you are correct on the first note that yes, treatment is the formal process of getting help, and that can be in many forms. That could be a hospitalization, that could be a detox, that could be a residential facility, intensive outpatient, and so it is in the title. But I'm glad you clarify that because the treatment could also mean just getting your loved one, resisting loved one, to a point where they just accept help. And we know that help is a broad umbrella. Help can look in various capacities. As I mentioned in the first episode, some religions have their own type of protocol for someone who's struggling with mental health or substance addiction. There's ones that are face-based. There's ones that are
Just
more
science-based,
alternative and
right?
science-based. So yeah, the point is just getting to the place where, hey, I don't like how I'm living. There's got to be other options out there. I am surrendering. I'm willing to try something else in the form of help. And
Yeah,
so,
thank you. Thank you. Because again, the spectrum of people that listen to the show are are everywhere. I mean,
Hmm.
I'm like, uh-oh, I got a problem.
Hmm.
And I know it's even the smallest problem is affecting the family unit, which is a lot of what we're going to talk about today.
Hmm.
They understand their alcohol or substance is affecting their relationships and how they behave.
Yeah.
And so that can start very early on and get very severe. But
And to your
one of
second point, if I may, I don't want to forget your second point that you mentioned of how it's broad, and that's one of the things that I also talk about is the way I reference disease is we have a medical or psychiatric disease, but a disease is I conceptualize it on a broader umbrella of any entity that's been chronic in our life that's caused impairment in our lives, and that could be a person, place, situation, relationship, thing. And so sometimes we just think of a disease as a medical condition or a psychiatric condition or an addiction, but we all have some form of disease. So think of anything in your life which you've struggled with. And we mentioned one of the seven deadly sins. If that could be one of your struggles, gluttony, pride, envy, wrath, that is your form of disease. And so, yes, I conceptualize my treatment approach or my recommendations and knowledges to address any type of entity that someone's struggling with. Things like setting boundaries and limits, validating the person, recognizing there's hope, and recognizing patterns can be applicable to across any type of disease or condition someone's struggling with.
Yeah, and I like the comment, disease is really dis-ease. It's
Mm-hmm.
unease, right? With something going on in your life. So that's a perfect definition. One of the things I want to start with is I'm going to quote something out of your book, and this is important for both, for all people listening to understand that this is a reality of dealing with a substance use disorder. And it says family members need to realize that setbacks are likely to happen during the treatment and recovery process and should not be viewed as failures, but rather as data points, providing a great opportunity for growth and learning. And I just really thank you for sharing that. It's a message I give to people over and over again. Um, because I'm watching, the progression and then something traumatic happens and, they go for it. But if they're being honest, and we'll talk about your H2O formula in a minute, and they show up and go, oh no, I did this, they generally recognize that it wasn't the best choice. Um, but understanding that that's part of the process of healing is
Mm-hmm.
so helpful to getting people back on track as opposed to you failed and you had so many days and now you blew it. I'm like, look, one day, one night doesn't ruin all the progress
Mm-hmm.
we've made. Let's keep going. It's just part of your story. So, would you like to share you know, your experience with helping people with that concept, whether it's a family member or a person that was struggling?
Yeah, it is a very, very important concept, and that's where it hits upon things that I tell people for sorting is trusting in the process. As long as everyone's doing their part, the process, we have to have a level of faith and trust in it, and that is on the family side or loved one side, and the person struggling is exactly that. Struggle, failures. If you listen to quite a lot of people who have navigated through success, they actually invite struggle. I don't know if I mentioned this in the first episode, but the CEO of NVIDIA, which is the technology company that does a lot of
Mhm.
AI and software, he's mentioned to a Stanford undergraduate class, he says, I'm worried if you aren't having some type of pain and struggle in your life. And they kind of laughed half heartedly and they looked at him and he was very serious. And he said, no, I'm serious. He said, if you're not enduring pain and struggling, you are minimizing the opportunity for growth or you're not pushing yourself to a limit. Because he said basically to me is anyone can be happy. That's not the hard part. When things are going right for you in your relationships and your career, anyone can be happy. But it's when you have moments of adversity where you navigate through that I believe is one of the differentiating factors between people who progress in their trajectory of life and people who don't or stay stuck. And so one of those things too is actually James Clear, who is a author for the book Atomic Habits. Is he? That's where I got that from. He said failures are data points to which is a compass, and we either look at I look at a setback as when you're on this trajectory, anything that takes you off course. That could be a tragic event, that could be a loss of some sort, even a medical condition, and to getting back on track. And we learn from that. So usually people who struggle will look at that setback as a deficiency, or there you go again, this is my trajectory in life. But someone who progresses in life will look at it as simply an information point, data to which to get better from.
Right.
And I see that with a lot with families is because, and especially in the actual formal treatment process, that's why I talk about, maybe we could talk a little bit about later, the difference between a relapse and a lapse. And we
Mm.
hear those concepts and we just think automatically, oh, a substance. But no, again, with they will have a disease, something that we've tried to lessen or even eliminate is that relapse is when we engage in that behavior we've tried to lessen or eliminate, an angry outburst or some type of behavior or a substance. And a relapse to me is when you have this constant trajectory because you have a weak recovery program in place. Maybe we can talk about that later. And that's the constant. I'm not doing anything. And then when I struggle, I dip really low. But
And I
without
go
any,
right back to where I was and maybe even worse, right?
yes. And when you don't have a recovery process, because a recovery process to me has certain attributes, that's fellowship, that's honesty, that's being open to direction, that's a form of purpose in life. If you don't have that, if you get out of that belly of the whale, if you do, then it's a long struggle. And if still you don't have a recovery process, you're gonna relapse again. That's what a relapse looks like to me, this rise and fall.
Well,
The
let's get
different,
right into that because that's exactly what we want to talk about today. You have
yeah.
a visual on page 169 of your book that talks about probability of relapse and lapse and its risk factors and protective factors. And I was
Mm-hmm.
like kind of looking at it going, where should we go? And I think we should talk about maybe risk factors and then address the protective factor that
Mm-hmm.
upsets that. And right at the top of this graph, which I couldn't agree with you with everything that you've said more, but you say a lack of treatment or support and I experienced that as well. We all know that, well, with alcohol, there's dry
Mm-hmm.
January and there's Lent and there's, and let's just clear it out. Um, but you're not really changing anything about
Yes.
the way you think. You're just more using grit and willpower
Mm-hmm.
during that. But when people start noticing it being harder, it really does involve a support system. And a lot of people take the challenge with me or they do a rehab stint. Let's talk a 30 or 40-day rehab or a 84-day or 90-day, challenge. And they're like, woohoo, I'm
Mm-hmm.
good. See you later.
Exactly.
So let's talk about why the support system and the treatment plan is so important for longer term success.
I mean, we've heard it all before in different various forms. The people you surround yourself has a huge impact on who you become. One of the things that I heard from one speaker was he said, "Let me look at your phone. I could tell a lot about you from the people you surround yourself with, from your contacts." And I even do that in formal treatment, as I tell people that let me look at your last 50 or 15 to 20 plus text messages. We could reflect upon that when they're in the height of the struggle, and we'll see who they're talking to. Some of them are their drug dealers. Some of them are people they have toxic relationships with. Sometimes there's text there of angry outburst or a lot of blaming, and so it's a real realization. So support and fellowship to me is one of the most important protective factors in shielding us from this disease, because this disease, when remember we personify it as a separate entity out of us, it doesn't define us, but it's a separate entity to us. It thrives in isolation. When people are depressed and they're drinking, yes, they may engage in that behavior around people, but most of the time they're doing it in secret in the isolations of their home, the bedroom, and it's secretive. And that's where the disease loves it. But once you create a fellowship, you greatly weaken it. We also hear, there's power in numbers. So it is critically important to surround yourself, because that fellowship also provides you accountability, objectivity, and they're able to hold you accountable and responsible. And so, yes, and so
Yeah,
fellowship is
and
critically important.
and this really is about, and this is probably the most difficult concept for the person transitioning, because all we know is what we know, right? Our
Mm-hmm,
friends. Even if I go to
mm-hmm,
the alcohol, all my friends,
mm-hmm.
that's where everything was, in the
Yep.
bars. And trying to look at something different is truly frightening. That's why I love the faith-based approach. I am a
Mm-hmm,
faith-based approach. Um, it is a little easier, not always easier, but to find non-drinking uh, uh, people
mm-hmm.
in community at
Yes.
churches, right? That's why many of the 12-step programs are really successful, because you're not alone. You have community, you have accountability, you have everybody trying to do the same thing. So yeah, uh, doing this solo is
Yeah,
not.
it's a real grief and loss process for people, is because when they're early in recovery, these people that they've been connected with and drinking with, these are family members, these are childhood friends, these are high school buddies, these are college friends, and so there's a huge grief and loss with that. And that's why it takes some time to create new fellowship. And the way I do that is I look at it not on the personal level, but the relationship level, meaning that, for example, if someone is with you, they supported you throughout life, however, they're unhealthy for you because they drink, and we don't take it on the personal. I said, well, okay, on the personal level, that's going to be very tough because there's emotions involved, and that's going to drive your decision making. Well, my gosh, that person was with me through my cancer diagnosis. That person didn't leave my side, yet they are drinking unhealthy for you. And so you take it on the relationship level. That's why I asked them, is this relationship healthy for your recovery? And that
Amen.
really clarifies it. Said no. And maybe at one point when that person gets hopefully healthy, then you can reinvest the relationship. And I've never had anyone who truly wants to get better tell someone close to them saying, hey, you know what, I got to do me right now, I got to work on recovery. I've never had someone tell them like, no, screw that. And if I tell them, if you have someone that tells you that, like, hey, what's getting sober all about? Life is too short. Then I said, you got to reevaluate that relationship, because I'm not sure if that's a healthy relationship for you
And
to
my
begin.
community kind of gets that a lot. It's a little heartbreaking,
Mm-hmm,
when they realize that the friend they thought was a friend was only their friend because it was the drinking bar
mm-hmm,
buddy.
mm-hmm,
But that is the opportunity to create awareness in what we're
mm-hmm,
looking for in life, because what we're looking for is true connection.
mm-hmm,
And that's going to give us the high and the joy that we really
mm-hmm,
want, and the dopamine hit that we really want, right? And while it's heartbreaking when people kind of go by the wayside,
mm-hmm,
it's eye-opening as
mm-hmm.
to the truth of
Yeah.
what we're doing, where we're going, in the direction we want to head. So,
Mm-hmm,
yeah, community is important. If you're serious about changing the direction and your mindset about life without substances, the people you hang around with are the
mm-hmm,
most important. Absolutely. Now, boy, this is a big one too, and one that you're smack dab in the middle of. Family dysfunction can be a risk factor as well,
mm-hmm,
and I would imagine, especially, well, it doesn't matter whether you're in rehab or just trying to quit,
mm-hmm,
on your own with a support group, you still got to go back home every day.
mm-hmm,
And it's almost probably worse for somebody who's taken a break from it for 30 days and had
mm-hmm,
a very calming,
mm-hmm,
healing environment.
mm-hmm,
And then they have to go back, and it's
mm-hmm.
almost like, a shock to their nervous system. Can you talk a little bit about the family dysfunction and how maybe you can develop a protective factor over that from a family perspective and
Mhm.
from a person dealing with healing.
And that's a very tough one. And where we see people be most successful on the individual and the system level, meaning the family system level. And remember, system level doesn't always have to mean parents and siblings. A family system could be good friends, coworkers that are, if you're intimately involved with them. So it doesn't necessarily have to be the nuclear family, so to speak. But that is one of the most difficult things that people struggle with is when I go back home. And so the increase of probability of success is when the family unit, the most intimate family members are part of the recovery process. And if you recall in the first part, I talked about that boat, that not everyone's going to be on that boat. That boat is usually the most intimate people. These are the people who have the most influence or probably have the most resources available to support you. And typically, these can be parents and spouses and adult or old enough children and sometimes siblings. But not everyone's on that intimate boat. Intimate boat meaning the first part of the process, which could be like 30 to 90 days, the roughest of the storms. And those are the people who are going to be held accountable, hold the vision, and doing their own growth and work there. And so there are going to be some times where there might be some people within the family unit that aren't conducive to the initial healing process. And that's why we have to vet those people. And so I know it's very tough. And so if someone goes back home, no matter how strong their recovery is, and they're going back home or that same environment to a family unit or a system unit that hasn't changed or evolved in the same habits, their probability of success greatly diminishes, especially if you don't have much time in your belt. You are 6 months or less, a year or less. But even then, even someone who has a long-term recovery, they realize that the longer they stay in that environment, there's a saying, that Denzel Washington mentioned that the longer you hang around a barber shop, sooner or later you're going to get a haircut, and it's true. And, it's very true. So the more you surround yourself, and I've had people make those decisions that whether it be with a spouse, whether it be with family members that maybe aren't healthy, is that they're part of the recovery is to set that healthy limit and boundary. Like, hey, right now our relationship is not a good fit. And I actually had a gentleman who had a wife and two kids who went to treatment several times. And the third time he went to treatment, he didn't go straight home after his
Mhm.
residential treatment. He was living in a sober living, and then eventually he'd go back home for a day on the weekend and come back home. And it was a warm transition. It was definitely a softer landing to that. And because everyone has changed, when you remove someone from the family unit for 30, 60, 90 days, a year, 2 years, the family unit has evolved and changed. And you can't just supplant yourself back in there and think everything's just going to go back the same. People's roles have changed. And so, yeah, sometimes we have to set boundaries with those people very close to us. And that's part of the healing process as well.
Yeah, and I want to I'm not sure if I want to address it here or maybe at the end is that trust factor. That
Mm-hmm.
trust factor has to be inherently um prohibitory towards getting sometimes the support that
Mm-hmm.
people need,
Mm-hmm.
and the strength of the person going through it, I think,
Mm-hmm.
is necessary in understanding I've got to build that trust. I can't demand it because, but the family member has to slowly look for signs of change and positive
Mm-hmm.
change, you
I'm
know.
not sure if you remember that quote that I talk about truth and trust.
Yeah,
If not, okay. And if I may talk about that, I
I
heard
can.
it from actually one of my clients who went through some form of treatment is because she struggled with getting trust back from her daughter. So she was in and out of alcoholism. She was middle aged and decades of worth. And when her daughter had a child, she said, "Hey, mom, I can't have you around our child if you're not going to stay sober." And so she was distraught, and someone told her that. And so sometimes what we do is we try to force our trustworthiness, like, well, look at me, look how I'm in treatment, I have a job now, look at me, I'm sober, I have 10 clean urinary analyses, look at me, and so forth. And I said, whenever you have to force your trustworthiness on someone to believe it, we're not going it the right way. So someone told her very cleverly, and I use it as one of my templates for people, is he said, truth over time builds trust.
Right.
As long as you're being true to your words reflect your actions, that will eventually rebuild trust. And so that's all she did. She didn't go out proving. She just continually did what she said she was going to do. And I believe when you're truly authentically honest and in recovery, there's an energy, a look in your eyes, and a difference in your speech than someone who's white knuckling it. And so that is one of the most powerful concepts I've ever heard for anyone building trust is just truth over time builds trust. Just be true to your word. Let your words reflect your actions, and you will rebuild trust again.
Right. And a lot of the things that I talk about, of course, in my devotional, is integrity. As
Mm-hmm.
one of the things that we realize over time is like, what happened to me? I'm a liar. I'm like, I
Mm-hmm.
I I hide things in the darkness. I lie. I put
Mm-hmm.
alcohol in a coffee cup, right?
Mm-hmm.
I go, I only had two when I had seven, right?
Mm-hmm.
And but that's it's crazy
Mm-hmm.
how substances do that, and that's not your nature, but you've got to find your nature again. And I
Mm-hmm.
love what you're saying. It's just
Mm-hmm.
about being true to your word, being
Mm-hmm.
finding that integrity again. And when you
Mm-hmm.
find it in yourself, people will see it. I
They
love
can
that.
sense it. Yeah. You can't
Yeah.
fake the most intimate people in your life. They can tell. As a parent, we're both parents, you know right off the bat when your child is telling a fib or a lie. You just know, and they're nonverbal. They just look away for a glance. And I tell a lot of clients that they think like, oh, my parents had no idea I was drinking and so forth. They had no idea anything was going wrong. I said, you know what? Trust me, as a parent, they did. They didn't may know exactly, or they didn't want to say it, but they know something was off. That's just the inherent, especially a mom. You cannot fool a mom. Parents are equally are connected, but the reality is for males is that we aren't connected on the level for obvious reasons, physiologically, birthing, but there is a deep connection between a mom and a child that we as males cannot truly identify with. And so try to fool mom and good luck with that one.
I love it. I love it. Okay, I think this is where we begin talking about your H2O formula,
Mm,
which I love. This is a formula that you discuss in your book is absolutely critical for healing, but you also have it low on H2O as a risk factor and high on H2O as a protective factor. So
hmm.
let's talk about what
Yeah.
H2O is.
H2O. Well, um, having seen being in my clinical work for almost 20 years and seeing, hundreds, maybe sometimes on level thousands of clients to the treatment capacity, you start to look at very common themes on those people who progress and don't progress.
Mhm.
And so H2O, we know H2O in the science, it stands for water, right? And so, but the three most common attributes that differentiates people who continue to be successful in the recovery process and don't are these three attributes. And so H2O stands for two H's. So one of them is honesty. The second one is humility. And the third one is being open to direction. And it was very similar to what they say in the Alcoholics Anonymous. They talk about honesty and openness. But I found that humility, and I'll talk about each of them. So I even call it the medicine that can inoculate the disease. And so honesty is critically important. You have to be truly honest with yourself and others, because if you're not honest, you're harboring secrets. And when you harbor secrets, those turn into unresolved anger called resentment. And almost always resentments turn back on yourself. And so I call resentments the acid of our souls, or for the termites of our inner being. And that's why you look at many different religion, theoretical orientations, and they talk about working through resentments, letting go of resentments is a critical factor in healing. So being honest is the number one. Humility, if you look at humility in the dictionary, it is the root word for having been humiliated. Right. And so humility means to me with the disease in that respect is respecting the capabilities of your disease. Does it mean it dominates you or disempowers you. I mean, it can, but we have to recognize its capabilities. And you think of anything in life that you disrespect its capabilities, you know what can happen. I use the reference of the ocean if you are a scuba diver or a sailor, the mountains if you're a hiker, right, or a skier, and so you have to respect the capabilities of what you're up against, because if not, that's when it can empower itself. That's what people say, like, I got this, or so the scary words to me is, I got this, I'm done with alcohol, I'm completely done. I say, well, respect the capabilities, you never know. So being humble is going to be critically important. And the last one is being open to direction. And that can also mean open to feedback and recommendations, because when we're closed off, we're not humble. And some languages of, hey, I'm going to just do it my way is a risk factor. And so those three elements have been the robust to almost, I would guarantee anyone in this world who are struggling, if they're high, and actually use a scale of 10 being very high. If you're 9 and 10 and all three of those, I guarantee you're successful. If you're low, if you're struggling, I guarantee you are low in one or more of those. And it's never failed. I've asked that in all my groups with the hundreds or thousands of clients. And if I say their struggle, no one's ever been completely honest, humble, and open direction, and then they're really struggling in their mental health or substance addiction.
Yeah, I love that H2O. So honesty, humility, which is the H2, and open to what is it?
Direction, openness,
Correct,
open to direction.
to direction. Well, we have to be open to direction because doing it our way didn't work. We
Mm-hmm.
we were trying to do it our way for a long time. So yes, I agree with all of those. And I certainly haven't asked you this in the past, so I will I'm going open here. What what role does higher power play in
Mm-hmm.
healing?
A big role. And so one of the things I talk about is some of the most critical attributes of a strong recovery. And so, uh, recovery, of course, is any plan in place for healthier living. And so, recovery can look different, like I mentioned earlier. But I talk about spirituality. Spirituality is can be in the form of a higher power, a God. Spirituality, meaning the spirit, can also mean your deeper purpose and meaning. And so,
Mm.
I get a lot of people sometimes in treatment who range from agnostic atheists to very, very in touch with their higher power. And if not a higher power or God, to a greater process, what is your deeper purpose and value in working on their spirit? And it's never failed. And for me, and at least in the clients I've worked with, people who went through some type of healing recovery process who were atheists would leave treatment saying, you know what, maybe there is something out there. And someone who was agnostic say, you know what, I think there's a God there that I'm going to kind of explore. And people who are connected spiritually already, they even enhance the relationship even more, and it's even stronger in their faith. And so, no, spirituality, and I do find, and research shows that people who have some form of spirituality, whether it be a higher power, God, to a greater purpose and meaning, fare better than people who don't. It's because that's what I
Absolutely.
mean by that. When you can defer to a greater process, that when I am doing my very best, authentic best, I trust in this greater process, and it's a really, really, to relinquish that level of surrender is very empowering and powerful.
Yeah, I certainly agree. That's why I'm unapologetically on the Christian side of it. The name of
Mm-hmm,
my book is The Plans He Has for Me, and
mm-hmm,
it speaks to exactly what you're talking about. There's a better plan. I was created for
mm-hmm,
a purpose. That's pretty exciting to put
mm-hmm,
that substance aside and try and start looking for, well, wait, because I
mm-hmm,
used to be so, one of the things I used to say a lot to myself when I was struggling, I used to be so, goal oriented. I used to be
mm-hmm,
so happy. I used to be so good at this, right? That's what your purpose is. That the
mm-hmm,
substance stole your purpose. So let's
mm-hmm.
try and bring that I used to be back, because you can find that person no matter
Yes.
where you are in the
Mm-hmm.
process. So, um Thank you for all of that. And there's more, kind of risk factors and protective factors. They all fall into the generally the same category of what we just discussed. And
Hmm.
again, I'll put that in the show notes. But one of the other things I wanted to talk about in this episode is really the phases, and I want to keep the you have another exhibit in your book. It's called The Phases of Recovery. I'll call it The Phases of
Hmm.
Healing. And keep the timelines out of it because I think we're so unique in
Hmm.
the
Sure.
timelines, but these phases are really critical. And so you call the first phase ICU, and then the second phase is probably 3 months to a year, which is I see as a very critical phase. So let's just go through the phases of healing
Hmm.
as you define them in the book.
Hmm. And yeah, the reason why I came up with that is because a lot of family members or people going through the healing process have a lot of questions. Like, okay, well, for example, so their loved one's in treatment, and for the first 2 weeks, oh my God, they've been here for 2 weeks. Why are they still thinking of alcohol? Or a client will because they've been drinking for like 10 years.
Exactly. Oh, you went
And
into detox. You're done
yeah,
now,
yeah, you should be good.
right?
Or it's like 3 months in, a client will say, "My God, I've been taking antidepressants. Why do I still think about my traumas? Why do I think have thoughts of suicide? Even 1 year, why do I still have dreams of using heroin when I haven't used for a year?" And so that's where this came up with. I'm like, why? Or that also comes with the relapse versus lapse. Parents will come in and say, "Oh my God, this was all a waste of time." And that's where a lot of that. So I conceptualize that as what to expect on the individual and family level on both the mental health, physical, social, spiritual side through the trajectory of life once they start to accept help. And so I divide it up into 4 phases, and phase one, phase two, phase three, phase four. And so phase one, I know, yes, exactly. You're absolutely correct. These are just my estimations based on the clients I worked with, but these are definitely flexible in the time frame. But I had to put some type of quantitative, so there's some
And
type of
it's
framework.
broad enough to fit into anyone's time frame. My differentiation that I see a lot is in that pink cloud. I
Hmm.
only see it for
Yeah.
30 days because
Yeah.
remember, I'm challenging people to 12 weeks. And
Yes.
so they're super excited for those first 4 weeks. And then they're
Yeah.
like, oh, it's boring. Is this ever going to get better? You
And I'll talk about that. So that first phase, the first 30 to 90 days, I equivalent to the ICU, which is the intensive care unit for in the hospital wing where you're in bad shape, basically. And so, because when you're in the ICU, because you've had suffered some traumatic event, you're not thinking about getting married, having kids. You're thinking about survival. And that's what's really critically important, right? Tell family members is you have to do whatever it takes to keep your loved one there because that's where a lot of the most resistance and change can take place. People
know.
are detoxing from substances. People are angry. They're there because they're forced to. There's all kinds of different levels. And then what happens is people leave treatment at that sort of level. They said, forget this. I'm more miserable getting sober than I was drinking, right? And so that's the whole body and mind are healing, and so we have to allow that time. So that's what the 30 phase one is for that moment of time, 30 to 90 days. And then so phase two is typically 3 months to 1 year. Generally speaking, 1 year is I look at as early recovery because a lot of changes that take place. If you're taking medications to find the right medication, even a diagnosis, an accurate diagnosis can take months or years. Setting limits and boundaries with people, finding new fellowship, coming up with new structure, routine, and accountability in life. And so that's what's most critically important, especially in that first year, because that's where you see most of the relapse and lapse in phase one, phase two. Phase three is 1 to 2 years, and phase four is 2 years plus. And what's happening there is over time, you get more automatic and comfortable in your recovery process. And so I look at recovery here like phase one. This is phase one. This is the most important thing in your life because if you don't, something bad can happen. Phase two, it's up here. Your recovery's here where you're starting to see life a little bit more in a panoramic view, but recovery is a little bit more automatic. Phase three, it's here higher. In phase four, it's way above here. It's still the most important thing in your life because everything transcends from that, but it's no longer eclipsing you. It's no longer,
Mhm.
things are more automatic, and it becomes a little bit easier for you in more words or less. And so that's kind of where that comes from, the phases, so people can better understand what might be going through on their individual level and with the family. And a lot of those, like we mentioned, a
And
lot of those scenarios.
I want to, especially for the audience that is listening here, the ones that may be struggling, every phase is easier and easier. Every single phase gets easier and easier. The, I deal with that first 12 weeks, right? And people are just feeling so good. They've documented their progress. I'm sleeping better. I have
Hmm.
better
Hmm.
relationships. I'm doing this better. Like, yeah, life is still a struggle, but depending on the trauma, of course.
Hmm.
But that first year is a bugaboo, right? And here's how I like to look at it. It's not that it's harder, it's that it can be surprising. Um, and I always like to look at it from the science of the brain and developing new neural
Hmm.
pathways. Every season, summer, winter, fall, spring, brings new challenges and new things that you haven't dealt with before.
Hmm.
And so a lot of people go, gosh, it's summertime, it's barbecue, it's the boating season, and
Hmm.
they've never dealt with that, right?
Hmm.
So everything you've learned up to that point
Hmm.
is solid. It's just figuring out a new way to navigate your new life.
Hmm.
And once you
Hmm.
get through it, the next season will be easier and easier
Hmm.
and easier.
Yeah.
And it's not that you can't get through it quickly if you have the mindset to do it, right? Let's just say
Hmm.
you're helping your clients develop the awareness of, oh,
Hmm.
I'm going into boating season. What am I going to do?
Hmm.
Right?
Hmm.
It's not like they're in pain at that moment. They may have anxiety about thinking about that, but you're going to give them tools to get
Hmm.
through it. And
Yeah.
then what happens on the other side of it?
Yeah.
It wasn't as
Yeah.
bad as they thought, right? If
Yeah.
they're prepared.
Hmm.
Is that true
Yeah,
for
for
you?
sure. Yeah, and if there's something I could say as well, and you say a lot of great things, and one thing I like to look at in general is it's important to look at the micro successes. Micro meaning smaller. Sometimes we think of the big successes, like when I was giving those, true, but sometimes we laugh at it because it is true to some degree, where people are saying like, yeah, I've been in therapy for 3 weeks. Why don't I feel happier again? And so we have to look at the micro successes. And one thing I tell a lot of family members is that, like say their loved one relapsed or lapsed after residential treatment or some form of treatment, or of a time frame of 30 days. I say, well, okay, well, let me ask you this: prior to this intervention of treatment or healing, if they drank alcohol back then, what would have happened? Oh my God, well, they would have attempted suicide. They would have got psychotic. They would have been homeless. What happened now? Well, wow, they drank a bottle of wine, but they were able to reach out to their therapist, counselor, pastor, or whoever, and they were able to get up back on track versus the lapse. It wasn't the big dip, but it was the lapse. And I said, well, there's a difference there. So we have to look at the micro successes and not the macro successes. A lot of times we want change to happen, and they have so much faith in the process that they have these overly arching expectations. Well, gosh, here, they're supposed to change that quickly. No, it's these small changes that need to take place. Another thing I want to mention too is sometimes we correlate. That I do believe there is a time correlation to the healing process. However, it's what we do in that time. You can be in treatment or some type of healing for 2 years. You can go to all the groups, but if you're not engaged, if you're not being honest, humble, open direction, I've seen people who start the healing process, and they're in 30 days versus someone who's been there for 6 months. It's because they're engaged, they're willing, the family unit's there. All these attributes start to line up. And so Denzel Washington again, quote him again. He has some great quotes, by the way. He said, just because you're doing a lot doesn't mean you're getting a lot done. Right? I
Mm,
say that you can run around for a mile in circles and not get anywhere. And so you have to be very intentional for what you're doing and recognizing the building blocks of the micro successes. And
yeah.
one
And
last thing I want to say too with that phase one is that it's really critically important about the honesty with the H2O model is that a lot of times people get the healing process and they'll be honest with like 100 things. Oh, I'm honest with the money I stole, the people I cheated on, the drugs that I did. But then there's maybe 1 to 2 secrets on this end. It could be the abuse they endured, the molestation, the people they've harmed also. And I tell them, I ask people, I said, which one's going to take you out, make sure that you're going to struggle or relapse in a substance? And they all say these 1 to 2 secrets. And so it's critically important to come clean with every single one of your secrets. Does that mean you have to tell the world? No. Do you have to scream it from a mountaintop? No. Because sometimes people, well, I tell God all my secrets. Well, I tell my pet, and so forth. And I tell Mother Nature. I said, that is fine. That's important. But I need you to tell it to some living being on this earth, because so you can get immediate feedback, whether it be a pastor, a counselor, a priest, whoever else, may be a guru of some sort, a life coach, a therapist, a sponsor, is that you have to come clean because there's healing and you need to get immediate feedback on an interpersonal level as well. And so I want to really mention how critically important it is. Just because you're spending a lot of time doesn't mean you're healing. You have to put in the work and you have to come clean with every single one of your secrets.
Right. I think when you say that, one of the things I think about with a lot of people, and I think it does go back to your protective and risk factors, is other forms of self-medicating,
Mm-hmm.
right? If you switch from, well, drugs to alcohol or
Mm-hmm.
alcohol to marijuana, right? You're not really
Mm-hmm.
solving the root issue, because the root issue is checking out of life.
Mm-hmm.
Would you agree with that?
Yeah, it's a sophisticated coping skill for struggle or pain. That's what it is. It's there's a saying that the degree of one's coping mechanism is directly proportional to one's degree of pain. So directly proportional is one goes up, the other goes up. And so a coping mechanism can be anything. It can be a substance. You can work as your coping mechanism. You can go from one relationship to the next, sex, drugs, all those things to bring you that you are trying to bring balance to some type of imbalance. And so, yes, so so you have to be mindful. You can transition from alcohol into maybe eating, or maybe eating into, jumping from one relation to the next. And so we have to understand that. And so, yes, if you find yourself engaging in some type of coping mechanism that's kind of extreme, you have to ask yourself, what am I compensating for? Because there must be some degree of physical or emotional pain that is starting to increase as well.
I wish somebody had told me that. I knew that well, I went from cigarettes to alcohol, I believe, and alcohol then to sugar, but I didn't understand that
Mm-hmm.
addictions transfer, that this
Mm-hmm.
my brain is still looking now. Thank God I'm going down the
Mm-hmm.
spectrum. But, I think if somebody would have told me about the sugar, I would have been more careful. And
Mm-hmm.
now I see it. I see it. I had gotten involved in like everybody else does, the games on the iPad or the
Mm-hmm.
phone. But now that I'm aware of what addiction looks like, of the process of it, I'm like, oh, there it is. I'm going to stop
Yeah,
that right now
exactly.
before it goes
Mm-hmm.
off like the
Mm-hmm.
downhill train. And I just think that's such an important thing to educate people on,
Mm-hmm.
because, going from one trap thing to another trap thing is no fun either.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
yeah.
And so finding that nice balance is part of our human condition. That's part of the journey, and sometimes the fun part of the journey in some cases.
Well, and that's why I like to say finding the purpose, finding out that God has a better plan for you. That is where the real joy is found,
Mm-hmm.
and using your gifts, and you're happy when you're using
Mm-hmm.
your gifts, and then add on to your
Mm-hmm.
influencing somebody else, even if it's your children or your family members or your coworkers. That is where some serious dopamine hits can can take place,
Exactly. And
right?
sometimes people think purpose is this grand thing, like, well, I have
Mhm.
to feed the homeless every weekend, or I need to donate $1 million to the local library. No, your purpose can doesn't have to be something on a grand scale. Being
Mm-mm.
kinder, can be your purpose. Being of service to others can be your purpose in many ways. And so recognize purpose is what it means for you. And once you find your purpose, it is your fuel in life. Is because you wake up thinking about it. It drives you, and it brings a lot of meaning to your life. And so for all your listeners out there, just recognize, keep looking. There's gifts of your healing out there. If you just got to look for it and open that insight, and it will solidify into a purpose. And I can speak for myself. I don't know if you read in my book, for my 20s were lost of what I wanted to do in life. And I was in another PhD program. I was doing all some other things. It wasn't until my early 30s that I came across this field, and it's like this resurgent of purpose and this drive and passion. So it's very freeing when you realize, wow, this is what I'm supposed to be doing.
Well, and it's interesting that you say that because my motto is it's never too late. I didn't find my purpose till my 60s. And so, I'm dealing with people in their 30s or 40s that's just too late for me. I'm like, can't
Mm,
say that to me. Uh-uh.
yeah, exactly. It's
Doesn't
never
work
too
on
late.
this girl. So,
Hmm.
um, well, thank you, Dr. Brian. I want to recommend his book again, How to Get Your Resisting Loved One into Treatment. Again, I think the all of the concepts in here are applicable to all stages, even though I know, Dr. Brian, you're dealing with an acute stage level, but
Hmm.
it's completely transferable no matter what stage you're in,
Hmm.
whether you're a family member or the person struggling.
Hmm.
Right? It's just
Hmm.
so funny. It's good to look at the other person's point of view. How do people find you if they want to know more and follow you, Dr. Brian?
Okay. Well, you can find me on my website, drbrianlequanan.com. Do I need to spell it, or are you going to send
No,
that?
we will put that in the show notes.
Okay. Yes.
drbrianlequanan.com. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's where I've excerpt of my book there. You can access my book. I have all my media appearances there and a little bit of what I do. I'm also on Instagram at Dr. Licuanan, at TikTok at Dr. Licuanan, at YouTube at Dr. Brian Licuanan. And so
Awesome. Awesome. Well, again, thank you for coming on twice and being such a light to so many families and people struggling. I really appreciate all of the work you do, and I appreciate the time you took out to talk to me about this.
I appreciate the opportunity. And I appreciate what you're doing as well. Keep it up.
Thank, thank you.